Hey everyone, my name's Gunther, and welcome back to the channel. We are back in Down Under, our Australian-themed habitat house, with our new and improved dingo habitat. And that's right. If you remember, one of our first Australian habitats for Cedarbrook Park Zoo was the dingo, and it really did not look great. You can be honest. It was not very good, but it was all about a learning experience, and I am super happy to kind of close off our Australian house with the dingo, because now we can really see going from the old to the new and bringing everything together with this awesome looking habitat with suspiciously large amount of rock work. Now, no doubt you've already seen that this episode's a little bit longer than our normal speed builds for Down Under, and that's by design, because I really want to talk to you a lot about the idea behind this habitat, and I want to show off a little bit more of that normal speed build for you guys as well. Now, the idea behind having this originally was going to be a fully enclosed habitat was to have something that was going to keep our guests away from the dingoes. In our first dingo habitat, a lot of the feedback I got was that the habitat barrier just wasn't as realistic as maybe it should be. They were a little too close, dingoes might have been able to jump over the water, and we want to keep guest safety paramount. So, to that end, creating a fully enclosed indoor habitat kind of accomplishes that. Now, because we're dealing with something a little bit larger and having learned from my previous mistakes, wanted to focus on all of this rock work you saw it during that intro cinematic, and the iconic feature was going to be this archway. Now, I realize that archways are like a dime a dozen. You can easily use the faux archway to create your own, and it works. For me, it was a little too easy, it was a little too rounded, so I opted to create my own, just again using a bunch of the plaster rocks and then kind of copying them around. Now, to feather it out and make it look a little bit more realistic, I also added in more of those small faux rocks all the way around the base. You know, see that come together now. And the idea behind it is it just gives it a little bit more life. Now, originally for this habitat, I also wanted to have this archway sideways to allow the water to flow through the gap. But I realized that as a guest, you wouldn't be able to see it. And that's not what we're here. We are here to see this archway. We want to have our eyes focus on this because it's almost like a portal into another world, especially when you consider working through glass. So after a lot of rock work, some terrain paint, and just about everything else that we would need to create this, we finally ended up with this new and improved start to our habitat. Now, before we get into the foliage and the large portion of this speed build, which is going to be foliage, I needed to make a den. And I struggled on what to use as inspiration for a den. So I turned to Pinterest, which seems to be the #1 tool a lot of people use when playing Planet Zoo if you're looking for inspiration, because there's so many photos on Pinterest, it's easy to utilize, and I'm a huge fan of it. And at the end of the day, I can have it on one screen and then build it on the other one. And this is a perfect example of taking some inspiration and building a new den. So I was looking for dens for the dingo. Stumbled across this really cool zoo. I can't recall where it was, but something that stood out to me was their den was actually built into a hill. Had a little stone door that allowed the dingoes to go in, and it was kind of like a little cave / underground den for them to hang out in. This also provides some off exhibit areas for them to relax, so if they're kind of a little tired of all of the guests, they can go in here and hide, and it worked out. So after using some planting pieces to create the roof, which we are going to change, you're not going to see it happen, but I do swap it out with a really cool idea, and then just some aquatic rocks. Now, I did mention we swap out the roof, you're not going to see it, but I ended up replacing it with a bunch of bark pieces, and this provided a little bit more toned down. The green was really cool, but as you can tell, this habitat's not really about green vegetation, it's all about this deserty vegetation, grassland stuff. So utilizing the bark as a base, I was also able to sink in a bunch of additional foliage on top of it, and you'll see it in the final cinematics. I do apologize that you're not going to have a chance to see it on the speed build, but it really works out. But this is becoming their den. This is going to be where they can go and hang out and just relax, which at the end of the day, everybody would love to have a place to relax that they don't have to talk to anybody. Who doesn't want to talk to people sometimes? So with our den finally squared away, it's time for us to move back onto the foliage, and oh my goodness, this is the largest foliage plot that I've worked with in a long time, and using that slower process is time consuming to say the least, and you can kind of see it all happen here. But the entire concept of taking your time with foliage is you can be a little bit more intended, and that's really what happened here. So I learned from my previous dingo habitat, a lot of the feedback I got was that the foliage wasn't that realistic, it was really green, so instead I went with these more earthy tones. Now, sadly, we're building on a European map, and the way the game is built, you can't mix soil types from different maps, so we don't get that really rich red-orange color. Instead, we have to go with this brown one, and to offset the brown, I added in some trees. I realized I said I didn't want to have green, but trees are kind of the exception to this entire rule. Helps to mellow it out, balance it out, provide a little bit of contrast, and all that goodness. Now, as we're putting more of these foliage together, you may have seen a little bit of our pool of water. Now, this is the first time I've ever tried this, which is I placed some plaster on the ground, colored it a little darker brown, kind of gives it a little bit more of a muddy look without necessarily having a mud bottom to it, so it looks a little bit more realistic and looks more man-made, which at the end of the day, this is an indoor habitat, so everything's pretty much going to be man-made. It has to be to work within the confines of the habitat build. Now, really cool is the fact that if you think about it, we have 4 distinct habitats for 4 distinct biomes within this entire habitat house, which I thought was really cool, and it was kind of interesting to think about it. And it didn't really hit me until near the end of this build that we've created 4 different biomes for the entire habitat house. Okay, so you've maybe made it halfway through the foliage portion, and if you're kind of tired of looking at foliage, you want to see the rest of the build, I should have put chapters for this video so you can actually skip ahead. But in the meantime, I want to kind of address something about this build, which is the prominent use of Australian-themed objects. The entire idea of building an Australian house is we want to feel like you've been transported to Australia. The best way to do that is to place a bunch of Australian-themed objects. So to that end, you're going to see them pop up all over the place. The idea is it feeds to the theme and the challenge, which is to build something in an Australian pack. And with the exception of a few objects, we actually kind of follow through with that. Now, I realize I say that, and you may be like, hey, you've placed a lot of aquatic rocks. And you're right, the faux rocks are super important to, I think, any build, so I feel like it gets a hall pass. They're allowed to be used in any habitat that you want. Now, I think this is a perfect example, adding a little bit of a splash of color, but keeping it in that Australian theme, so you get those really rich blues, some browns, and even placing in some sunshades adds a little bit of flavor to the entire build. And I actually like the way it works out, so you may actually see this prop up quite a bit. Now, speaking of Australian pieces, this is actually the African off-road vehicle. It's too good to not use in any type of outback setting, because, outback vehicles, gotta drive, sand dunes, they all kind of roll together, and I'm actually shocked that we didn't have a vehicle in the Australian pack. But I feel like now I'm rambling about things I want to see, which I'm not really here to see that happen. So our foliage is coming along, and thankfully you're not going to have to wait much longer to see the final build, because I'm actually going to skip over a lot of the extra foliage, really just focusing on this one corner so you can see it all come together before we'll do some additional little screenshots. You can see the changes happen throughout the time. Now, in terms of how long it took me to do this particular build, we're actually looking at about 5 hours, which is not something I normally talk about when it comes to speed builds or builds in general, is how long it took me to build something, because the build itself is pretty fast, but everybody builds in their own time. What takes me 5 hours might take somebody else 10 or 3 or 2 even, so everybody builds in their own pace. Now, I've said it before on the channel, if you're watching a speed build and you're like, hey, this is coming together really fast, how do you do it? The secret is we probably don't build it really fast. You're seeing a cut down portion of it. I've removed a lot of it, and it's not as easy as it sounds. In fact, the majority of the time in this entire build was spent on foliage, which I've said it before and I'll say it again, is not my strong suit. I'm still learning and still working on it. Now, I do want to give a special shout out to one piece that I use entirely too much, which is the sand sedge grass. It really helped to make everything that you're going to see pop together. And this is what I mean by you can see it all pop together. Everything's finally looking holistic and really much more Australian outbackish. Now, we're moving away from foliage for a little bit and focusing more on some of the traditional builds that we're going to see. Now, I did add this house in earlier, and the idea behind this is this is going to act as our storage and keeper hut. So this is going to be how our keepers get into the area. It's going to be a little bit closed off. Our guests are not necessarily going to see it, but it fits with the theme and the idea that this is an Australian outback. Now, selfishly as well, Really didn't like the way the exterior looked. That back wall is really bland and didn't really know what to put here. So adding on this little porch takes up a large amount of space and draws the eye away from that monotone color and into something that's a little bit more rustic and cool looking. So let's talk about mistakes. I think I've been very honest and very open about making my own mistakes in playing Planet Zoo. Really, it's one for you to kind of have fun and laugh about the fact that maybe I made a rookie mistake considering I've been playing this game for so long, which everybody can do. But number two, it's kind of share that mistakes happen and it's all about having fun and rolling with it. And a perfect mistake is building a habitat and not actually testing to see if it's large enough. And one of the things that a lot of people tend to forget, including myself, is that foliage, especially rocks, take up a lot of space. Initially, I required 1,100 square meters of space for this habitat, and the interior is actually 1,100 meters, which is perfect. And then I added all the rocks, and I ate up like 350 square meters. So didn't really work out too well. Now, to prevent this, or to allow me to actually have a pack of 2 dingoes, I ended up creating an exterior section. So what can I say I learned from this entire build? To maybe check that your habitat can actually support your animals before finishing it. Because it's been an awful long time and it would have really sucked if it wouldn't work. I can laugh about it now because making mistakes is all about laughing and having fun. So lesson learned, will not make that mistake ever again. But that being said, I did something different for the first time. I've modded the game. Now I realize that modding the game can be daunting. So I'm here to tell you, super easy. If you're playing on PC, definitely recommend you modding and having fun with the game. Mods include remasters of skins, some additional quality of life, but there is one mod that I thought was really cool, and it's not that bad in terms of changes. And I say that, and you might disagree, and that's totally cool. It's all about to see, you have your opinion, I have mine, and it works. I would love to hear your opinion on modding. Let me know if you think modding is a good thing or a bad thing. But here's what I did. I downloaded Planet Zoo Plus. So what does Planet Zoo Plus do? I think you might be asking. Well, that's a great question. I don't know. I don't know what it does. But what I will tell you is it does modify some of the size requirements and hitboxes for a lot of animals, which is actually really nice. It means that you can maximize your space. You get a little bit more of a realistic size requirement compared to normal zoos. So like dingoes don't require 1,000 meters squared anymore for 2 of them. They require like 500. Much more manageable. This allowed me to fit in an entire pack of dingoes, and I'm super happy about that. Now, in the event that you're like, hey, modding is not cool, but you want to try it out, it's really easy. You can actually just add the file and remove it, and it's not going to really damage or affect your game as far as I can tell. I'm not a pro at modding, I'll be the first person to admit that, but it's kind of nice to explore that aspect of the game. And really what this means is you might see some remasters of certain animals appearing on the game because they just look really awesome. Shout out to Blob for kind of encouraging me to do this on his stream. Whether or not he realized it, he actually encouraged me to download a mod and try it out. So I just want to say thank you very much to Blob for all of that. And thank you to everybody else as part of the community who really helped me to create this. I did mention that it was built on stream, so I got a lot of live feedback. And I would love to have you guys join the stream as well. So the easiest way to do that is to subscribe, because it'll let you know the next time that a stream is available, and you can kind of come hang out, listen to some awesome music, and just talk all things Planet Zoo, and maybe tell me that I'm building something really cool or something really terrible. Help to keep me in check before maybe I release a video. So we're approaching the end of the episode, but if you look really closely in the back, you are going to notice our den has been replaced with this bark and even more sand sedge grass, and kind of gives you a taste of what that looks like. Again, apologies that you just didn't see it as part of the actual speed build. We've successfully also moved to the exterior of our habitat. This happened really quickly. It actually happened on stream, and if you want to know when our next stream is happening, all you have to do is hit the subscribe button. It'll let you know when I'm live, and you can join in and have fun and hang out. Now I'm going to let you guys know, probably going to be doing a live stream this weekend, which is the weekend that this episode came out, and I would hope to see you guys there because we are going back to Iguazu. That's right, Iguazu is still on the table. We are pretty much done with the Australian house. There's a lot of extra work that still has to go into it. Just work on the side. I'm not going to bore you with the details, but we're pretty much done. and that means we're going to go back. Iguazu is a really cool place. I really want to get back there. I've taken a break with Cedarbrook Park Zoo and Down Under, so I feel like it's time to go back there and try some new things. Because taking a break from there and coming back to Cedarbrook Park Zoo was just to help me refresh and get ready for it. On top of that, you might have noticed I've kind of been a little slow in updates for Planet Zoo. I do apologize. I had some time off. I was just really refocusing and recharging my batteries, to say the least. But I do want to say thank you very much for sticking in there. You've seen some other games kind of show up on the channel. Rest assured, they're not taking me away from Planet Zoo. Planet Zoo is still going to be near and dear to my heart. Planet Coaster 2 is going to be something that we're going to see on the channel as well. So really excited for that, because we all saw that huge deep dive. No pun intended, because it was pretty much all about swimming. But I'm really excited for that game as well, and I hope you are too. Now, as always, I just want to say thank you so much for supporting the channel, supporting me and my growth. This is something that I've had a lot of fun doing. Never expected to get to this point, but I'm happy it did. And I really want to say how thankful I am to you guys for watching and providing feedback. And don't forget, provide feedback on this build. All you have to do is leave a comment below. Let me know how you felt about it. We have quite a few dingoes that could use some names, so I would love to get some name recommendations so that we can kind of get them out there. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the episode as well, we are going to be doing kind of like a super cut of our full Down Under build with a final tour. So expect to see that come out sooner rather than later. And we can kind of check in and see how our habitat host is actually doing. With a final few details, we can finally say we are done with our dingo habitat. And what better way to celebrate than taking a look at some cinematic shots of our entire build. Now, as always, I just want to say thank you again. And of course, ciao for now, everybody.